In August of 2011, the Marcus Nispel directed reboot of Conan the Barbarian was released in theaters. Behind that movie, however, was almost a decade's worth of development on earlier iterations. At various points, filmmakers ranging from John Milius to Robert Rodriguez and James Cameron had been in talks to direct, while both Arnold Schwarzenegger and Vin Diesel at various points were attached to star. In an exclusive long-form interview with Midnight's Edge, Fredrik Malmberg, the keeper of the Conan legend, and would-be producer of the films, detailed this development history, and how the movie rights ultimately ended up with Avi Lerner's Millennium Pictures, who proceeded to make the movie starring Jason Momoa.
So, you had relaunched the original Conan stories in print, relaunched the comics based on those original stories, and facilitated Conan's world being explored in Age of Conan. But then there was making another feature film, and getting there was a long journey. Can you take us through it?
Yeah, so when I had been dabbling with Hollywood, going back and forth with my options that never came to fruition, as I told you before earlier. But I knew with Conan, it's such a big American IP that you have to operate the whole CPI business out of the US. So I started traveling before I moved to LA. I started traveling a lot, and of course, getting a film off the ground would be massive for the IP, because at the time when we took over, there was really no activity. And the way that merchandising and licensing works, it is very entertainment driven, because it's also about getting the confidence from investors who make, these big merchandising toy lines and video games. It needs confidence that, a lot of people like this character. Is it relevant? People kept asking me, why are you doing this with, something which was a bodybuilder for 25 years ago? I said, no, you haven't seen this yet. So when we acquired CPI in 2002, there was an option with Warner Brothers that was about to expire. And what Warner Brothers wanted to do was to support the Wachowski brothers at the time. They had just done Matrix, extremely successful film for them and for Warner Brothers. They were huge Conan fans, and they had convinced Warner Brothers that take out an option to Conan because we want to co-direct together with John Milius. So when your biggest director tells you, and this is very common in Hollywood, is the big studios, they have a big, I would almost call it like it's a chamber of treasures, and that's what do they control, so that when a big director comes into the head of the studio, in this case it was in the early 2000s, they can open the door to their treasure chamber and say, well, we have Captain Blood, and we have Conan, and we have Elric, and we have Star Wars. And then the big directors will fall for that and says, oh, okay, I'll do a deal. And the mutual understanding is that, well, you do a couple of big commercial hits for us that we know that you can do, and then you get to do your favorite project. Same with actors. You have to do a little bit of Twilight, and then you can do your indie budget movie, and we'll finance that too. So it's sort of it's a quid pro quo. So we were stuck with that. I went to Warner Brothers, and it was clear that they didn't know, because that's how Hollywood works. It's never like, somebody's going to make a movie and then they start doing it and then it's happening. It's always a chain of events that need to be perfect. And at the time, the Wachowskis were busy doing Matrix 2. So Conan was just sitting in their treasure chamber waiting for them to be ready. But of course, so the option expired, and we went out to all the other studios. And then it turned out actually that Sony was very interested. Actually, not Sony, but Sam Raimi. It was Sam Raimi was very interested, and he called me. I was in Sweden, and that's another Hollywood thing. Is like whenever they want to speak to somebody, they just tell their assistant, I need to speak to that guy. And nobody in Hollywood knows anything about time zones or anything or where people are. So I got a call at 2 a.m. in Stockholm, and it's held on from Mr. Raimi. And then it's Sam Raimi calling from set on Spider-Man 2. and I think it was like December or something, and telling of his love of Conan, and he wants to do Conan. And long story short, that leaked somehow that Sony was really going to pick up the Conan rights. So all of a sudden, I think, I don't know this, but I have a feeling that the Wachowskis caught wind of this and started calling the Warner Brothers people and said, "What are you doing? We're going to lose. We want to do Conan. You can't let it go." So we actually closed a new deal with Warner's, which was even stronger than the deal before, which was a very, very big, very powerful deal that my predecessors had negotiated. But we ended up getting an even better deal. And this was then, I guess, late 2002, early 2003. And then that project, which I thought was going to be, great. And I started to plan my move to the US because things were picking up business-wise. And we went through, it was clear after Matrix 2, nothing happened. I met with John Milius. He had a little house on the lot of Warner Brothers. And I think he was writing the story and he was working with them, and nothing really happened. And then during Matrix 3, I think it was clear that the Wachowskis were not going, they had enough. They were burned out. They had personal problems. They were going through, the whole thing with the transgender issue coming up for them. And also, I think the process of the whole Matrix project was just too much. So the message we got was that they wanted to focus on video games. They were going to make a video game. They were going to sort of step back a little bit. But at the same time, Robert Rodriguez reached out. So through his people, this spreads. The community gets hold of news like this, even though, we can't really go out at the time. I can't go out and tell, Variety or Hollywood Reporter that, this is industry work, and you have to respect that, we can't be driven by the rumor mill, but everybody who is in Hollywood will pick up these news, like what's happening there. So Robert Rodriguez turned out to be a massive Conan fan. He's also a big Frank Frazetta fan. So he calls and says, "I'm really interested." And of course, for me personally, that's great. Big fan of Robert Rodriguez. He could be fantastic. We could do a great film. And so the Warner's project kept going, but now it was going to be with Rodriguez. So again, he was a very in-demand director at the time, and this was around Sin City had just premiered, or it was premiering around that time, and I had just moved to the US, and we felt, okay, well, if we at least get it. I went down to see him at Troublemaker Studios in Texas, but it was clear that Harvey Weinstein wouldn't let go of Robert Rodriguez that easy. So, of course, he kept throwing stuff at Robert all the time, so he couldn't really focus on Conan. And that's when we ended up in these endless extensions, 1-year extensions of the option with Warner Brothers. And it became a very big thorn for us at CPI, at Conan Properties, because remember, we had an entity now that was against my will, but the board really wanted to go public. So the company was preparing to go public. So I had 2,000 shareholders and a big board who demanded to see some action. When's the movie coming out? When's the movie coming out? Furthermore, we also had an issue of the last installment payment, which was a big payment for the purchase of CPI, and not actually CPI, but for the rest of the library, which was subsequently bought by CPI from the estate. So that was another multi-million-dollar deal that had to be paid off. And everybody was looking at me like, do more deals, get more stuff in. And of course, the movie was a crucial factor for us. And it was clear at one point when it was also clear that Robert Rodriguez he didn't want to let go of this film, but it was a big project. And I think he wanted to bring in a co-director. for various reasons. We got a call after one of these extensions. Harvey kept him doing other movies for the Weinstein Company, and at that time you could say that he was really Dimension. That was Robert Rodriguez was the Dimension label.
Pretty much between him and Tarantino were.
Yeah, well, Tarantino was more Mirror Man. He was big,
that's true.
So yeah, Robert Rodriguez was kind of like the little brother of Tarantino, so sort of. But he was very well taken care of by them. He was the star for them, and they fought very hard to keep him busy. And then I think that pressure got to him too. So we got a call when there was another extension was coming up, and I had told everybody. I said, nope, we're not going to extend one more year. I need to get a movie going. And then we had a call from Robert where he basically said, I had dinner with Jim Cameron the other night, and he wants to co-direct with me. And I'm going, oh my God, what is this? This is just tracking down James Cameron to confirm that would be a massive task. But we did. We managed to track him down, and he confirmed that, yeah, we had dinner. That would be fun. But we also knew, okay, when is this movie going to get made? James Cameron, that could take 10 years before we see this movie. But we agreed and told Warner Brothers, this is their last extension. We will do another 12-month extension. And that takes us into 2007 in the summer. And that's when we have our final installment payment to the estate, big payment coming up end of August. And I'm sitting there knowing that, this is not happening with Warner's. I'm talking to CAA, and we agree, let's go out when the Warner's term expires for their option. Let's go out to all the studios and see how can we get going. And here's the term sheet. These are the terms we want. And that's not to say that, it becomes the deal, because of course then it's up to people to sort of, it's like fishing. You send out the bait and then you see who's nibbling on it. And if there is a competitive scenario, you might get your term sheet or even improve on it. And all the studios wanted it, and they wanted it for various producers that had deals with them. But I was not happy with how CAA handled that situation. It was not to my liking, and I had my own connection. I wanted to make this movie with Mark Ordesky as an executive over at New Line Cinema, and New Line had just been extremely successful with Lord of the Rings. And Mark, I met with Mark a couple of times. He came through to me with flying colors. He was very genuine. I trusted him, and he, I thought he could get this going. If he could, he is the man who really got Lord of the Rings financed and set up, because he really believed in Peter Jackson's vision. And he knew Peter from his college days. We had a very similar background. He's also a gamer. He's still a big Dungeons and Dragons player, and he's also a word builder. And he totally bought into what I was saying, and I totally bought into him too. So we kind of worked on, let's do this, and we finally got a deal memo coming in during the summer. I think this was late June of 2007. And remember, I had this big payment due end of August. And one of the studios that had come in and said, we will pay the term sheet, we will do the term sheet, and here's a huge pay-or-play offer for Vin Diesel to play Conan, was New Image and Avi Lerner. And I didn't really consider it much at the time, although one of my other friends, since I had moved to LA, Joe Gatta, was an executive there, and I knew Joe, and he had been an agent, and we had worked together for some years before. So you had to take it at least seriously. But my personal favorite, where we should end with, even if we hadn't, that was maybe not the best financial deal, but the best creative deal would have been with New Line. And then in that summer, something happened over at New Line. So that can be, we call it deal fatigue, when you negotiate, and then everybody just gets tired and the steam leaves the engine, sort of. But that wasn't the case here. It was more, why don't we sign the deal that we've now agreed? And there were fewer and fewer, calls coming in from them. And then you get really nervous because it's hard to describe, but you can get that feeling of, okay, this is slipping away. And end of July, nothing was happening, and we had sort of sitting there for 5 weeks, and you start wondering what's going on here. And I remember, because of course my relationship with Mark Ordesky, we had built a really good personal relationship. I was down at Comic-Con, and I was being chased by Joe from New Image saying, they're not going to do the deal. They're not going to do the deal. So why don't we do the deal with us instead? And I was really thinking, there's something to this. And I called Mark and I said, Mark, this deal isn't happening, is it? And he said, give me a couple of hours, I'll check out. And then he called me back after a few hours, says, no, it's not going to happen. And of course, that was, there are certain, when you have big major events happening, and you sometimes just want to go and stand in the corner and throw up. And that was one of those moments where okay, I got to go to this corner, I'm going to throw up. But that's how instead of doing that, I said, where's Joe Gatta? I got to find Joe. And I said, Joe, if your lawyer comes out here and my lawyer comes out here and they can close the deal in 48 hours, then we have a deal. And he said, let's do it. And that's how the deal ended up with New Image. And to their credit, they made the movie, and they paid all what they had to pay. But I was concerned, and I let my board know that I think the movie will get made, but I am not sure we're going to get a good movie because they have never made a good movie.
For how Avi Lerner's Millennium Pictures would proceed to make the movie and the fallout from its ultimate box office underperformance, check out the full unabridged interview with Fredrik Malmberg that this clip was taken from. To make sure you stay up to date on all things Conan, including future developments on the Conan series that is being developed at Netflix, hit subscribe, indicate you want notifications on all videos, and before you go, let us know which of these Conan movies you would have wanted in the comments.